Hello class, welcome to Geometry Lesson 11.4, which is all about spheres. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to calculate the volume of a sphere and solve problems involving the volumes of spheres. So first of all, let's talk about how do you find the volume of a sphere. So you guys have maybe used this a couple times in the past, but not frequently. So this might not be one that you guys have memorized yet, but you need to memorize this for your test. Volume of a sphere equals 4/3 pi r cubed. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make with finding the volume of a sphere is they, instead of doing cubed, do squared. So make sure you don't make that mistake. The second most common mistake I see people do is they change it to 1/3 instead of 4/3. So make sure that you pay close attention to those details. I'm going to write down one more thing that's going to help you finish your homework today, and that's the equation for the surface area, so the area on the outside of the figure, and that is 4 pi r squared. That formula is, like I said, just going to help you solve for radius or a couple other things in today's lesson. So let's look at example 1, where we use the volumes of spheres to solve problems. Let's look at our first question. So the drama club makes a big ball from foam to hang above the stage for a play. They plan to cover the surface of the ball with metallic fabric. What is the minimum number of square meters of fabric that the club needs? The first thing that you would do, because we are given the volume of the ball, 1.8 meters cubed, we're going to plug that into the formula. So we take the volume formula, and instead of writing V equals 4/3 pi r cubed, we're going to write 1.8 equals 4/3 pi r cubed. Then in order to get the radius, we have to isolate the variable r, right? So we're going to move the 4/3 pi over. When you do that, that 1.8 becomes 1.35 over pi. And then something new that you guys probably haven't had to do much of yet, the way you undo a cube is you're actually going to do what's called a cube root. So the way a cube root works on your calculator is you'll hit the number 3, then you'll hit your second key, then you're going to hit your caret key, because remember, every time you hit the second key, that's what gives you the light blue functions written just above the buttons. And you're going to see something that looks like this. That's the light blue function above the caret key. And so that's the picture that'll appear on your screen. And then you just type in the numbers, okay? Whatever number you're using. So in this case, it'd be 1.35 divided by pi. And then you would hit enter. Okay, so the way you undo a cube is to do the cube root, just like the way you undo a square is to do a square root. Okay, so that's how, if you plug that in, you end up at 0.75. I highly recommend typing that out into your calculator, since you know what answer you're supposed to get. And if you don't get that answer, come see me and I can help you figure out how to use your calculator. You don't want to lose points on a test just because you don't know how to use a calculator. The next part of the question, though, now that we've found the radius, we can plug that in order to calculate the surface area. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, surface area equals 4 pi r squared. So surface area equals 4 pi r squared. I'm going to plug that 0.75 in. 0.75 squared times 4 times pi gives me 7.1. So the club needs at least 7.1 meters of fabric. And for those of you that have never purchased fabric, and you might be saying, you can't buy part of fabric, actually a lot of places let you buy portions instead of whole numbers. So if you get a question about fabric, you don't necessarily have to round to a whole number. Okay, why don't you go ahead and try to figure out the volume of a sphere, or what is the largest volume a sphere can have if it is covered by 6 square meters of fabric. So this question has you doing the opposite of what we just did. This time you're going to start with the surface area to find the radius. Then you plug it in to get the volume. Good luck. All right, for this question, hopefully you got the square root of 3/2 pi, 3 over 2 pi, I guess, equals the radius, the square root of that, and then plug that into the volume equation, and if you plugged it into your calculator correctly, you should have ended up at 1.4 meters cubed. Now, I know that, as I said earlier, plugging it into the calculator is kind of the hardest part, so I wrote out all of the different keys that you would hit. So first, you should start by doing a parentheses, then hit 4, divided 3, close the parentheses, hit the pi button, open new parentheses, hit second x squared in order to get your square root, and then 3 divided by parentheses. You need to group together that 2 pi, because otherwise it's going to do 3 divided by 2, so 1.5 times pi. But that's not the case. We're doing 3 divided by the quantity of 2 pi. Okay, so that's why I did parentheses around 2 pi, close the parentheses, close the under the square root parentheses, close the entire square root parentheses, hit the caret key, hit 3, hit enter. Now what that actually looks like on your calculator screen is this entire thing right here. That's what it should look like when you type it into your screen, okay? And if you type that in just like that, you should get 1.4 meters cubed. All right, example 2, find the volumes of hemispheres. Okay, so quick refresher, a hemisphere is half of a sphere. So just like a semicircle is half of a circle, hemisphere is half of a sphere. All right, new vocab word, we have something called a great circle. And a great circle on a sphere is the biggest circle that can exist on the sphere. Okay, so it's if you were to cut the sphere in half on a great circle, it would go directly through the center of the sphere. However, if you were to chop off just the top part of a sphere, that wouldn't go through the center of it. That wouldn't be a great circle. Okay. Now, the volume of a hemisphere is 1/2 the volume of a sphere. Makes sense, right? Because it's half of a sphere. So the equation for hemisphere, if you want to memorize, you can just change it instead of 4/3, it's 2/3, because that would be half. Or if you are someone that's like, I get overwhelmed by memorizing formulas, just remember, find the volume of the whole sphere, divide your answer by 2 at the end. Also an acceptable way to do this problem. Okay, why don't you go ahead and see if you can solve for the volume of a hemisphere with a radius of 3 feet. Good luck. All right, hopefully for this one, you ended up with 56.55 feet cubed, or somewhere really close to that. Remember, if you don't use the pi key, you're not going to get the same answer. And if you start rounding at certain places, you're not going to get the same answer. So make sure you're typing everything in just like it is. I want as exact of an answer as you can give me. If you have any questions at all on this lesson, please be sure to reach out for some help. Have a great day.